Today's guest is an award-winning documentary filmmaker. Ryan White has created countless documentaries over the years, from The Case Against 8 in 2014 to Goodnight Oppie in 2022. But recently, he spearheaded a project that quickly took on a life of its own, and for good reason. Ryan is the brains behind the Netflix documentary Pamela, A Love Story. We're chatting with him about the real reason he took the gig and what it was like working with the one and only Pamela Anderson. This is Advocate Now. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for being here. Pamela, A Love Story is so incredibly beautiful and moving, but you said at first that you had some hesitation about creating this type of documentary. Why was that, and what ultimately won you over?
I'm not usually the biggest fan of celebrity documentaries in general, and it's a very popular genre now. I get asked to do a lot of them, and I'm usually always saying no, and I'm very careful about even typically meeting celebrities because you hate being in a position where you're having lunch with someone and then you're saying no to making a documentary about them later on. So I was the same with Pamela. She to me was the most famous person in the world because I'm born in 1981. So when I'm a teenager, Pamela's at the height of her fame. And I think with that image I had of her came a lot of preconceived notions. And so I was very wary of even meeting her. But Brandon, her son, I had lunch with him in Los Angeles, and he just kept saying, like, I think you and my mom are going to get along really well. Just meet her.
And with the Pam and Tommy series out, I mean, it's easy to understand why Pamela and her family felt that the story needed to be told, but why did you personally feel it needed to be told?
Well, the Pam and Tommy thing wasn't even, we didn't know about that when we began this documentary. We found out about that while we were making the film because, we began this process over 2 years ago. I thought it was a story that needed to be told because I read Pamela's manuscript for her memoir, which she's been working on for years. And I knew very little about the life story of Pamela Anderson. Even when I first met her, that was more just 2 or 3 hours of getting to know each other and chit chat. But once I read her manuscript, I thought this is a wild life story and so much more important than I had ever realized.
I didn't feel like I had a lot of respect.
Did you want to be a serious actress?
I am a serious actress. I had to make a career out of the pieces left. But I'm not the damsel in distress. I put myself in crazy situations and survived them.
I've seen nothing but positive feedback surrounding this film. Particularly, I think you've helped to either change or clarify many people's perception of Pam. They realize how perhaps misunderstood she was. So what's it like knowing that you've taken this American icon and you've showed the real her?
Well, I feel like that was the joy of my job, was getting to know this icon and then just realizing how incredibly human and how incredibly relatable Pamela is. Whenever I would have these crews, all over the world, wherever we were shooting, people were always coming up to me and saying, like, oh my God, she's so normal. And I relate to her so much when she's talking about her kids or her failed relationships, whatever it was. I think Pamela's an incredibly relatable person considering her stature of fame. So it just felt like if we could bottle that sensation up and transfer it to the film format, that an audience would also feel that kinship with her.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't help but fall in love with her after watching this film. I mean, I left the theater saying, I just want to be friends with her. I just want to hang out with her. I'm sure a lot of people had a similar feeling. But she was wronged in so many ways. Knowing that it is very sensitive matter and a very complex story, did you ever have any fear that you wouldn't be able to fully do her justice?
Well, you always have to be okay with the fact that you're never going to be able to fully do someone justice in a documentary. I had the luxury that Pamela's baby was her memoir, and she was writing that alongside of me. And what I just kept telling her is we're making the anti-celebrity documentary. It's going to be really raw. It's going to be really intimate, and it's going to be cinematic because we have all of your archival, and we shot 8 millimeter with Pamela in Canada, which she loved doing. And so I hope, I don't think my film can ever fully encapsulate Pamela Anderson. I don't think any film about a person can, but I hope it's a bit of a love letter to her and her family, and that it's a piece of cinema that will last forever, that shows who this woman really was.
You have to be brave, and you gotta use what you got. Why can't we be the heroes in our own life story?
I think a lot of people might not realize how much went into this documentary. I mean, you had access to countless diaries, camcorder footage from Pamela. As somebody who also produces and works behind the scenes, I had anxiety listening to what went into this. How did you decide what to use? What was that process like?
Well, that was like a documentary filmmaker's dream. When
Yeah.
you always hear about these films where, my friends or colleagues, the other documentary filmmakers, happened upon this treasure trove of footage, and I had never had a film like that before. And so for me, this was that story of urban legend that I've always heard of. And I mean, getting to watch Pamela Anderson's home videos is incredibly personal and also incredibly entertaining. And, the stolen tape, which we've heard so much about, was just one of hundreds of tapes. And, not just Pamela. I think seeing Tommy Lee in this footage, I hope, in our film, really brings him back down to earth too, because I think they're both caricatures in pop culture's eyes in a lot of ways. And when you get to watch, and we watched so much footage that didn't end up in the film, but you really get to watch this love story blossom, and then this romance uh, lead to a family of four, and you get to watch that all play out on tape. And when you get to watch a couple do that just between them, because it was always one of them holding the camcorder, it is very humanizing. The diaries, I had no idea existed. I just kept finding them in all the boxes that Pamela has around her house, and she has thousands of them. I never thought in a million years that she would give them to me.
I wanted to ask you about her vulnerability because you said there was a screening in New York and you said that, Pamela is just one of a kind. She's so herself. And that really shines through in this film. Did you have to try to get her to feel comfortable opening up about some of the most difficult times of her life? Or was that just her openness and vulnerability?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, Pamela is a very naturally open person. I've seen it a million times now. So it wasn't that I was special in any way, and having to win over her trust. Once she dives into something, she is all in. And so she was very all in this documentary, and that extended to her honesty, I think. So I do know, like, she had watched some of my previous films, that were about. I've done previous projects about sexual trauma and childhood sexual abuse, and we had conversations about how she'd liked how those were treated in the film, because she knew there were going to be some very sensitive parts of her story. But she's just a very rare personality, I think, especially for a celebrity that just wants nothing but transparency and the truth, even if that means showing warts and all.
You mentioned your previous films. I mean, documentary filmmaking is such an incredibly powerful medium for storytelling. You recently directed Goodnight Oppie, which told the story of a NASA exploration rover that was sent to Mars and survived for 15 years. What is it that pulls you into a story and makes you feel like you need to tell it?
I wish I could figure that out, and I'd have a lot more I'd have a lot more of my life figured out, but it's just a gut instinct. And
Mhm.
we spend years. I mean, you could not be more different, right, than Goodnight
Yeah.
Oppie and Pamela Anderson, and I was making them at the same time. But there is something about, I like journey films, and I don't want to make retrospectives. And Pamela's life felt like a journey that we could watch unfold through these diaries and through the archival footage. And Oppie was an adventure on Mars. And so I don't know what the recipe is that makes me want to say yes to something. It's almost always a story about a woman. Even the robot was gendered, Oppie is gendered as a female. And I like those stories of adversity and people who are up against the odds and come out on the other side. Um, but yeah, it's always even a mystery to me what makes me pick the projects I do.
Ryan, thank you so much for advocating for so much and for so many, including Pam, and for spending some time with us today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
I'm Sonia Baghdadi. Thanks for watching and advocating. For more stories and content like this, visit advocate.com and advocatechannel.com.